Hey guys, it's Crystal here with Fertility Blooms, and I am a fertility coach. And today I did an amazing interview with a friend that has an amazing background in police enforcement, in holistic nutrition, in physical fitness. She's just incredible. And her main specialty is grief. And many of us don't understand really what grief is. And Kirsten is going to explain it for us. She is a wealth of knowledge. She's so compassionate. She's got the biggest heart. And I think you'll enjoy the interview. Bye. Hi, everybody. My name is Crystal with Fertility Blooms, and we have a really cool guest today. Her name is Kirsten with Transformational Life Coaching, and she is a grief recovery method specialist. Do I have to use the method?
Yeah, that's the process. Yeah, that's the program I use. Yeah.
That's the program. And I brought her on today because there's so much grief related with infertility that a lot of us don't even recognize it. So she has had so much experience that, like, I think we've already been talking for, oh my God, a long time. We've been talking for a long time off recording here. So I'm going to just let her do a brief intro and tell you about her whole journey, about why she's doing what she's doing, and then we'll get into some nitty-gritty questions. So welcome, Kirsten. Tell us a little bit about all the things you've done, because some of it's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Crystal. I really appreciate it. And I'm so grateful to be invited on to talk to you and your people today. So my name is Kirsten Frey. I am a transformational life coach. My company's name is Transformational Life Coaching. And as Crystal mentioned, I am an advanced certified grief recovery method specialist, which is just a great big title for helping people through changes and transitions and loss in their life. I also do life coaching, obviously, and I also do a one-day Create Your Life Vision Board workshop, and I'm also a Reiki master. So I have many tools in my toolbox. And my journey started, I'm actually an 18-year police veteran. So I worked for Peel Regional Police for 18 years, which was wonderful experience. Then I shifted into being a personal trainer and holistic nutritionist, which I did for 8 years. And now I've been doing this for the last 4 years, but it has been a transition for me. And I really see how I've moved from, it really is like coming from, being a contribution in like justice and safety and security for people, to helping them get strong and fit and healthy in a holistic way, not just like lifting weights at the gym, and now helping them with the mental, emotional piece of all the changes and transitions that we do go through in life. So I'm very grateful for the journey that I've been on right now. And I love walking with people along the path on their journey as well.
All your experience, though, kind of like it all kind of worked together, right? Like it
really did. Like, you didn't know it at the time, but
you wouldn't know it at the time, but like looking at it now, you're like, oh yeah, that made sense.
The benefits for what I do and what really helps me effective people these have in So I think we got through most of the part of my work, and the journey that's been so incredible for me is that, having spent so much time in policing, all of the things that I've done have allowed me to be in a space now that I feel really helps me to be an effective coach for people and help guide them through whatever experiences that they're having. So my policing background has helped me sit with people who are going through very difficult life situations, where I can sit in that space with them and I'm comfortable with the heavier emotions, the heavier feelings, without feeling that I need to fix it for people or anything, because the reality is I can't, but I can sit in the dark with them and show them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that there are steps that we can take to get to that point when they're ready. So that has been helpful. Of course, the background in holistic nutrition and training is very important around that. And I always came at that from, again, a very holistic background, which was stress management and like the whole mind-body connection. And now it's really about delving into that piece around our hearts, which so many of us disregard a lot for our logical minds. We're used to operating from our logical thinking minds all the time, our common sense. But we need to sometimes shift that down 10 inches into our heart space, because that's actually a superpower for us. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable in life, but that's actually where our true connection happens with others.
It's so true. It is so true. And I think there's a thing in this world right now that it's cool to be busy.
Yeah.
And I think we just like push our hearts away and say, no, I got to go do this. I got to go do this. I got to conquer this mountain or this and that. And yeah, taking care of ourselves, forget it. Right. So
yeah.
I think,
and it's important to have goals, right? It's important to
Yeah.
have those dreams and goals and things to achieve and attain. But there needs to be a balance, because the emotional piece is really super important. And as you know, when we don't take care of ourselves, inevitably there's going to be a backlash on that. So
Yeah.
when it's imbalance, think about nature. Everything about nature is cycles. As women, we have cycles. Nature has cycles. There's an ebb and flow, a time to grow, a time to like rest and hibernate. And we don't honor that anymore in our North American culture. We really don't. And so to our detriment, sometimes I believe that happens.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's start. What is actually grief? Because I think a lot of people, for me, I always think, oh, if somebody dies, then I'm going to grieve. But it's in our life in so many ways. And can you know better than anyone how to explain it to us?
So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to people about this, because this is actually a lot of what I do, is the education piece around it, because most of us aren't, and I didn't either. So, it's not like magically I knew this. I came to this, I've done my own grief work myself, because it was actually standing in my way. And this is the important thing to realize. Most of us think of grief as, sort of our natural, normal reaction to loss. And typically we think of that loss of like death or divorce. That's typically the things that come to mind. Yeah. But there are more than 40 life experiences that can create feelings of grief, because the second definition that we use for grief is all the conflicting emotions that we have when our familiar patterns of behavior either end or change. Like they either come to an end or they change. So think about, we've just come through COVID where everything changed. And so there was a lot of conflicting emotions that we had around that, where some people did really well through COVID, like finding balance and working from home and finding clarity around, this is actually how I want to live my life, like with more balance. Yeah. For other people, it was like the most difficult time because of financial constraints. If there were already sort of cracks in our foundation, I find COVID really amplified that for a lot of people, whether it was career, relationship, health, all those things. And, I even shared that story with you, like our son just graduated from university. So he's finished all these years of schooling, and like, there was no ceremony, there was no convocation, no walk across the stage and receive your diploma with the party and the hat and your friends and family and all of that. It was like, your diploma got mailed to you and like, thanks for coming out. And a month later, he's now working. Yeah. So, whether it's high school or university, like all these kids where we're not getting an opportunity to honor and celebrate and have these rituals and ceremonies that are so important for us to be able to complete one aspect of our life before we move into the next aspect of our life, whether that's positive or negative.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my heart breaks for these kids. Like, and I like walk and run in the neighborhood all the time, and you see all the signs, and I'm like, it's so sad. It makes me almost sadder seeing all the signs, because I'm like,
because that's all these kids that aren't getting a prom or a graduation party or anything else, those things, right? So, and we think, well, what's the big deal? People are dying and stuff like that. But the fact is, it's really anything that's of emotional significance to us. And again, it's not just about loss, but it's about the changes that we go through in life, the transitions that we have in life. Those can also bring up some of these conflicting emotions. And we're just not used to dealing with emotion because we've never been taught how to do it. So we just kind of like suck it away, stuff it down, suppress it, go online and shop, we have another glass of wine, like do whatever we do to kind of numb out from what's really uncomfortable or painful for us. But that's the thing with emotions. They're energy in motion. They're meant to flow through us. And when we don't allow that to happen, they just continue to build and build, and they will leak out at some point. They will show up in some way in your life.
That's what I just clicked in. That's why the Reiki is so important for you.
Yeah, I love Reiki.
Yeah.
Well, Reiki, I love from a perspective, and for people that don't know, Reiki is it's a Japanese energy system that really just helps you relax. And the way that I like to say is that we live, like you said, we're always so busy and doing and achieving and setting goals and all those things, which again is great, but we do it to the excess in our bodies, even though we have access to technology 24/7 and we could be on all the time. We're not machines, we're human beings. And we need that time of rest and repair to integrate all the things that we're learning and doing. And when we don't do that, that's when we start to be unwell, whether mentally, physically, or emotionally. And so the Reiki, I love that because it allows people to have an hour where it just allows the central nervous system to relax. Right. And we know that when we relax, when we get into that parasympathetic nervous system state, it allows our own innate healing ability to sort of activate. We can't do that when we're always going because we're putting ourselves in a constant state of stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get on the topic of our fertility warriors and sisters, because I feel like so many of us, what we do is we hear about something. So we'll do acupuncture, or we'll go do deep needling, or whatever it's called, or we'll try this supplement, or we'll go to this therapy, or we'll hear this doctor. And so we'll switch, or we'll jump over to this doctor, or we'll try this naturopath, try do this Reiki session, whatever. And we're going all over the place. And the missing piece is like our minds, right? I always say the mindset's like the biggest missing link to like the fertility journey, because I think we forget about that, and we forget about our emotions and our mind and everything connecting along with our fertility, right? 100%. So with the fertility sisters, we have our emotions are like, woo, sky high. And a lot of us, I don't know if it's a joke, but I'm pretty sure it's a fact also that most fertility girls are type A. And I'm guilty.
But all the type A's in the house, right?
All the type A's, yeah.
/ control.
Yeah, and we don't have control when it comes to fertility, and that's when we feel like, oh my goodness. And then we have all our emotions flowing. And then we do experience grief. And I'm going to name a few, and you're probably going to be able to share with me many more that I'm forgetting. But grief, of course, first thing that will come to mind is miscarriage. Then I feel like every time we get a negative test result, you're grieving that, because your cycle comes and you're like, every time you get your period, you're like, again, another failure. And so you're grieving another month of loss, which seems like that month feels like a year. Then you have girls that have to understand that they'll need like a sperm donor or an egg donor, and they're giving up their biological child. And they have to come to terms with that if that's their path. Or surrogacy, they have to grieve that they won't carry their child, but they'll have a surrogate. And those are just some of the little ones that, like, it's so much. And then there's the miscarriage. Oh my God, did I forget that?
No, you led with that. And to be honest.
Oh, no, it froze again.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about miscarriage.
So I would just like to say that there's no comparison, right? We can't compare grief or losses, because every loss, every grief experience that we have, every loss that we have is unique to us, because it's our relationship with the person, the experience, the whatever. So even if you and I share a similar experience, like I've had 2 miscarriages, so I've had that experience, but my miscarriage experience, it might be very different if you had a miscarriage. So we might, yes, experience a similar loss, but our grief is going to be very different because of who we are and our experience with that. So it's really important to not minimize our loss or someone else's, also not to compare our losses, because there is no comparison, because we're all unique when it comes to that. And really, under a big umbrella, Crystal, you just beautifully said it. And all those things that you were sharing, I could just like feel that. And it really is about all our unmet hopes, dreams, and expectations that we have, right, as we're going on the journey. And especially while you're still on the fertility journey. So every month that it doesn't, you have this expectation or hope that you're going to be pregnant, and then it doesn't take, there's that grieving system again. Yeah. But again, when you talk about like being type A and we're just, okay, so we're just on to the next month, and what do I need to do for next month, and so on, as opposed to sometimes we need to look at, there is a time for action, of course. There's also a time to be like, what is the emotion that's coming up for me? What is the feeling? And because all our feelings, our emotions are messengers. So there's a message behind every emotion that we feel. And when we don't allow ourselves to feel because it's too big or it feels painful to feel it, I'm just going to keep going. You can keep pushing that aside, but it's going to come back at some point. And so I always really encourage people, especially when you're in the middle of the journey. It's difficult. So find the support, the place that you feel that you trust, that you have that safe space to be able to talk about your emotions honestly, openly, regardless of how, it comes across. And oftentimes we can't do that with our partner because they're having their own experiences of grief as we go through this, watching us be uncomfortable or in pain or sad. And so we're all trying to like be strong for each other, but nobody's really being honest about how they actually feel through this time frame.
Absolutely. So when you're talking, I have a question.
Yes.
Now, you said we have to feel through them, our emotions. Mm-hmm. Does crying help?
Yes. Oh my God.
Is crying releasing it, or is it just like making you have I always, and this is, you're going to slap me for this after, but Kirsten, so I always say, my mom will call me with like some stressful news or something. And she wanted to watch this, I know, but anyways, she'll call me with some stressful news. I'm like, Mom, don't stress me out, because if I get upset, I'll cry and I'll get a headache and I cannot work the next day. Right. And she'll be like, oh, Crystal, when are you going to deal with everything?
What are you going to do with everything?
I protect myself, and I'm like, nope, don't tell me any bad news. I do not watch any news. I don't
watch news either, just because it's a conscious choice that I make, right?
Me too. When Oprah said years and years ago she didn't watch news because it wrecked her energy, I'm like, I'm with you, Oprah. So,
yeah, and I made that decision back in my mid-20s when I was policing, because I saw enough hurt and negativity and pain that I really didn't need to watch it on the news either. And working with energy now, I realize like how important that is. So you've actually tapped into something huge. And I talk to my clients about this when they come to see me, because again, inevitably someone will sit across from me at some point, and not everybody cries, and that's okay too. If you're not someone who cries and it doesn't express in that way for you, that is perfectly fine. But when I do have someone who's sitting across from me that is having tears and crying, it's always like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And they're like wiping them all away. And I'm like, girl, own those tears, because it is your body's natural way of releasing that pent up emotional energy that we're feeling. So when you stop yourself from crying, when you get that big ball in your throat and you're like literally like swallowing those tears back down, no, talk through it. Allow those feelings and thoughts and everything to express them in that moment through those tears, because again, it's your body's wisdom and beautiful way of releasing that stress. And it is all that pent up emotional energy. It's got to go somewhere. So when you keep swallowing it down, we know studies have shown that we can create dis-ease in our bodies just by thought alone, right? Like you said, don't stress me out. Even if you think about something that hasn't even happened yet, you can create like that pit in your stomach feeling, that like tight energy, And it hasn't even happened, but you've done it with your own mindset. And we're used to doing it with all like the worrying aspect. We're not used to doing it the positive way in terms of like, what do I want to create for myself in my life? What do I want this journey to look like, regardless of how it's unfolding in front of me right now? And that can be challenging. It takes practice to be able to do that, right?
Well, I'm glad crying is okay. And I know, if anybody watching, give us a thumbs up on the comments or something. Whoever's done this, any fertility sisters, I think we've all done it, is we've cried in the parking lot outside of the fertility clinic because we hold it together until we get to the car and we're bawling. And
well, the key is you need to be in a safe space that you feel that you could, because you are emotionally vulnerable in that moment. So you do have to feel like a sense of safety and security to be able to do that. Absolutely. However, what I would also suggest for all your fertility sisters and warriors that are out there is that, remember, if you have a partner that's going through that with you and that partner is male, they have heard that messaging that we heard growing up, like big boys, big girls don't cry, don't feel sad, here's a cookie. Like, we've been shown very early on, like, to suppress our emotions, and boys have socially heard that message even more so than women. It's more socially acceptable for a woman to have tears, but not so much for men. And so if you have, a partner or a spouse that's, allowing himself to have those emotions, hold that space for him, that it's actually okay. And this is why your body's like releasing up that pent up emotional energy. And it's actually a really good thing, because even as women, I've had women say to me, because men feel emasculated when they cry, like there's something wrong with that. Like they hear man up and don't be a pussy and all this stuff, right? Exactly. Like even joking in the locker room and stuff, it's joking, but it's not really. Your subconscious doesn't hear it that way. And you're like, I'm not safe to be vulnerable and show an emotion because I will be shamed or, emasculated as a result. And women have admitted to me that they feel weird when their spouse or a guy that they're dating is crying in front of them, because we've also heard that guys don't cry and they're supposed to be emotionally stoic. And so we expect them to be that way, but our men suffer as a result of that. They really do. I mean, men are 4 times as likely to commit suicide as women. That pain needs to go somewhere. And for men, it often shows up as anger.
And what I noticed, and I know my partner Francois has said this to me too before, is they don't know how to help us, and we often feel it's all on us, and then we kind of shut them out. And so we think, oh, he can't relate, I'm gonna call Kirsten because she gets it, she's a girl. And we totally shut them out, but it's their baby too. They're experiencing all the things too, and we totally shut them out. So,
oh my God, I love that you said that, because that was my story. And if you don't mind, if I share.
Yes. Well, yeah, we need to go into your story, because honestly, it's So
for me, I made the decision not to do the fertility journey after I had 2 miscarriages. And so, but I love what you said about the partners and how we push them aside, because my story totally highlights that. So I had been married before, and I had a son through my first marriage, and I was on my own with him for 6 years before I met my current husband, now Scott. And we've been married for 16, almost 17 years.
That's amazing.
So thank you. And so we got married in February 2005, and February 5th, and 10 days before we got married, I miscarried at 12 weeks. And so we had gone in for the ultrasound, there was no heartbeat. And so talk about, like, we're going in expecting to get the picture and all that kind of stuff. And then it's like, there's no baby. And so that was like a punch to the gut, huge, where it was like shocking. And then it was one of those, I wasn't far enough along to do a DNC. So it was like, take the medication. And so I went home to have the miscarriage at home. So I was a police officer at that time still. And so of course, like, I always have my stuff together, right? So Scott didn't know how to help me in that moment. And I was always the strong one. And so it was like, well, there's nothing you can do physically to help me through this. This is something I need to go through. So you can just go to bed. Like, it's okay. Right. So we were at home. So he went to bed and he fell asleep. And I went through that process alone. And it was one of, it was one of the things that brought me to grief recovery later on, I realized, because I always had referred to it as a soul shifting moment. But for me, it was I didn't even have language for it, Crystal. It was a heartbreaking moment. I felt that baby leave my body physically, and something inside me broke. And that's what it was. It was heartbreak. And so it was the loss of the baby, the loss of the expectation that we had, and being able to expand our family. I was so naive because my first pregnancy, I was going through, my husband had cheated. And so there was all this stress in my life, and my marriage was imploding. And yet I had an easy pregnancy, an easy delivery. Everything was easy from that perspective. So now I was with a man who wanted nothing but to have an expanded family with me. And then this happened, and I didn't understand why. I was so naive to how often. And it was so interesting. There were so many women that came up to me very quietly afterwards, because we had already shared that we were pregnant, because I was at my first trimester. So we had literally the week before just shared that we were pregnant. And so having to share that we were not anymore, I had women coming up to me, and so many women that would come up and very quietly would just like express their, sorrow for me, and that they had also experienced something like that. And I was just shocked at how many women had actually gone through that. And I was 36. I wasn't in my 20s. And I was like, God, I've been so naive. That was
my first too. I'm like, I didn't tell anybody. And then when I shared it with somebody, I'm like, what happened to you? What? Like, you don't realize, right?
No, because again, we always hold it, and miscarriage and infertility and all those aspects of it is private, and we don't share. We're not supposed to share those things with people. But what happens when we don't share, even with our partners, is we lose out on an opportunity for healing, for acceptance, for grieving, for support, for love and connection. And so that actually created some issues, because there was a part of me that was, so I didn't communicate what I needed from my husband.
No,
so he just did what I said as a strong, independent woman. So he just said, okay. And off he went. And I was really resentful. Like, do I really have to ask you to hold my hand or be with me in that time frame? And the answer was like, yeah, I did need to do that. And I didn't. So it's owning like our responsibility of like, how are we acting as a barrier to the love and support that we could use in those moments? Because we all need it from time to time. Like, none of us get out of this life alive. So we all need like help and guidance and support at some point. How do we not erect those barriers, to keep us from that?
Yeah. So how, as a grief recovery specialist, what would you do? Like, how do you help somebody? How do you work with them for miscarriage, for example, or accepting if they're ready to do an egg donor or a surrogate, or even, this is the hard one, is when people have been through years and years and years, and it's often, fertility causes a lot of relationship problems, mostly because we shut our partners out and they feel so disconnected, and you're going through losses each month and it just implodes. So how, when they decide, okay, enough's enough, we're going to accept that we're not going to have a child, or that, we're going to find another route of surrogacy or adoption. I hate saying adoption because it's my number one pet peeve when people say, why don't you guys just adopt? Because we looked into that route. It's not that easy, just for the record.
Well, and the thing is, it's what a lot of people do who are well-meaning and well-intentioned when we have a loss, where they're like, well, like for us, it was like, well, you could try again. And we did try again, and I miscarried again at 8 weeks the next time. And there was something in me at that time that just like shut off. So even though we weren't doing anything to stop pregnancy, I never got pregnant again. And it was a self-protective mode in my body that just was like, yep, no more, we're not doing this anymore. And so, and it wasn't a conscious thought. It was subconscious, because that's how painful it was, that my body's like, yeah, we're just not doing this anymore. And so, we talked about like maybe the fertility thing, and I kind of took the initial sort of steps into it. And it very quickly, it was just something that I knew wasn't for me to move down that path. And I didn't come to grief recovery till much later. And
but
so
for a step back, how did you handle the second miscarriage? Was it similar?
it was it felt like less of an emotional impact. It felt less significant than my first. I think because I was already a bit numb about that first one. And because I wasn't as far enough along, it wasn't even physically the same feeling. And
were you almost feeling it wouldn't work?
No, but I was afraid. I didn't allow myself. Yeah, I was afraid to allow myself to feel happy about being pregnant again. And then when I lost the second baby, like I said, while it didn't have the same, and again, because every loss is different, which is why when we talk about, oh, you can just adopt, or, oh, you could just have another baby, it's a misunderstanding that we call like replacing the loss in grief recovery, where just because you fill that space with something or someone else doesn't stop you from grieving the initial loss. So it's really important that we honor the losses that we have, whether we are pregnant or not getting pregnant. We need to be able to honor that and come to a healing place from that and decide whether we're going to continue on or we're going to make the decision to not continue on. So to answer your question in terms of how I would work with people, for anybody that's going through an infertility path, it's really no different than any kind of grief. And I deal with grief like the same way. It's a step-by-step process. So it's nice for people to have a start and a finish, but it's an educational program. So I have to be very clear. I am not a therapist or a counselor. That's not my scope of practice. I am a certified life coach with a specialty in grief recovery. And I am certified through the Grief Recovery Institute in Oregon in the United States. So
I'm going to hold up the book really
quick. Oh, yes.
We're not going to forget. It's the grief recovery method has a bunch of books, but this one, Kirsten had told me that I have, is really good for fertility sisters and warriors. And we're going to put her contact information so you can get it from her or online or whatever, but we'll have the details. I just don't want to forget this book because the grief recovery method is pretty a powerful system. Yeah. It's
been around for 40 years, actually. And it's funny, a lot of people still haven't heard about it because we're still operating sort of under the, the 5 stages of grief, which are inaccurate in that, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work was so pivotal for hospice care and people that were dealing with terminal illness, which is what that was actually. She came up with those 5 stages because there was nothing for those people and they didn't really have rights and that sort of thing. So her work was amazing. But it was meant originally for people who had received a terminal diagnosis and were trying to deal with those emotions that were coming up for them. It wasn't meant for the grievers, the people that were left behind. But because there was nothing else around for people to use, they've just sort of used these 5 stages of grief because there are no stages. It's not a linear process. We all will, it's like waves, and we know that it comes in and it comes out again, and then it comes back in again. And so it really is about understanding what is grief and loss and changing our languaging around the misinformation that we learned usually as very young children about how to manage grief and loss. And then it's about actually taking action steps. So I help people to take the actions to do the grief recovery where they can resolve what's emotionally incomplete for them from a loss of any kind. So it doesn't have to be just infertility. It could be any kind of loss that you've had in life.
Yeah. And there's 40 different types, you said.
There's more than 40 different life experiences that can create feelings of grief. And we don't recognize it as that. So it's so interesting. I feel like there's so many people that are walking around wounded right now, like emotionally wounded, that they don't recognize it. We don't recognize it. And that's what I love about grief recovery is that not only do you get your own healing when you go through it, like I did, and I went through it and I continue to use the tools always. But it allows you also to be a better support for other people in your life that are going through a grief or a loss. You'll hear it from a different space. You'll be able to be a heart with ears without trying to jump in there and fix it or analyze what's happening or judge it or criticize it. You'll just be able to listen and hold that safe space for people.
And that's
priceless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we just want to be seen and heard when we're going through these really, these losses and changes and transitions that we're all going to experience in life. It's part of the human experience, right? So,
yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, crying's okay. What other tools can we use to get through? Because this is what I do, I'll tell you. And I will cry, but it's always in my car, always. But I'm usually driving down the highway, and I have been pulled over once for this. And then the officer did, maybe it was you way back then, I don't know. But I remember they were like, go for it. I don't know about this girl. But I have the music blasting, like the car's shaking, and I'm bawling my eyes out, and I'm singing as loud as I can, and a couple songs, and I'm good. Yeah. And I'm usually speeding, because then the louder the music and the more you're crying and the louder you're singing, the faster you go. I don't know. It's just the thing.
The pedal comes down.
Yeah. And
then so, yeah, which is not necessarily the safest way to do that. It's your process and it works for you. So that's amazing. Yeah. What I would say is that anything that you do to help relieve those sort of emotions in the moment. So like for me, I've always been a person that really likes physical fitness. So going to the gym is very grounding for me. Okay, going outside for a long hike outside in nature is very therapeutic. I have therapeutic benefits from doing that. I have over the last, 2 or 3 years, really begun to use meditation. And I was one that fought that a long time.
Me too.
Monkey brain, too busy, but it's almost like a superpower that allows us to get still. And a lot of us are afraid of sitting still, because if we sit still, we have to deal with what comes up for us. And we're afraid, because it's like, once I get started, am I going down the pit of despair? I'll never like not be able to get out of it. Or I've heard this a lot, where if I start crying, I'm afraid I'm never going to stop. And it's just, but that just goes to show like how much emotions that we're holding inside that we're not meant to. We're meant to, as human beings, we have this full range of human emotion. And so we think to avoid pain, to protect ourselves, we're like, okay, I'm not going to look at like the grief, the anger, the guilt, the shame, the all these things that don't make me feel good, but you can't selectively numb emotion. So if you're numbing yourself to this aspect, then you're also numbing yourself to joy, happiness, contentment, satisfaction, bliss, joy, like all those things. So then we start to live life from this very controlled, emotionally controlled box, until something happens that blows the lid off that box. Because at the end of the day, you are a human being with emotions, and you can't control your emotions.
Yeah, it's true, but we tried.
We try, because we can control our thought processes. You can control what you think about or what you choose to focus on, but your heart is going to feel what it feels. And remember, if we remember the lesson that our emotions actually are messengers for us, they have something to tell us. And if we're trying not to listen to it, we're trying to manage the message, we're not listening. And what that means is like, we're actually throwing up barriers to our own path to healing, which will take longer. There's more of an impact. For a lot of us, we got to hit rock bottom before we start to like take the break or take a time out or do those things that will soothe us, because we have judgment around what it looks like to not be productive or not be busy or not being in action or whatever that case may be. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the judgment is really, I think that plays on a lot, right?
Yes, so we're good at that. We're very good at that.
And I just like to say, I was not a meditator, and anybody in my program, they know I talk about meditation now, because my first meditation, I went to a class and the lady was like on Brant Street in Burlington, and I'm sitting there and I'm all fidgety and I'm like going all over the place, and she brought me a cup of green tea and she's like, just sip this.
It really is about allowing ourselves to be present in the moment, which we don't, because we're so busy thinking ahead, right? Like to the next thing that we're doing.
I have too much to do. Yeah. But when you get it, and it's life-changing. Yeah.
It really is. It's like you're almost coming back to yourself, and it's allowing, right? And you're recognizing it's going through those tunnels of, change, transition that sometimes feel dark and painful, that we actually find our bravery, our courage, our resiliency. We find those pieces of ourselves that we have, but we never allow it to come out and through. And so like the action steps that I take in our program are very much laid out through the grief recovery method. It's a trademark program. It's evidence-based. Kent State University has done studies with that. So while it's not therapy, it is an educational program, it does have some therapeutic benefits. And the tools that I bring as a coach just, I feel, really help people through that process. And I've never heard anyone say, I wish I had never done grief recovery. No one ever says that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it, like all those things that I mentioned, like miscarriage or moving, because often I think fertility girls will come into their journey of, I want to get pregnant. However, things happen that are crazy on this journey. And your path to having a baby looks so different from what you actually envisioned, right? The end goal, I always say, is the baby. If that's your goal, then it doesn't matter how you get there, right? But a lot of people get stuck in the weeds, as you would say. And it's a process to grieve. Like, it's a process that you won't be using your own body or your own eggs, or maybe accepting that, you know, your life's going to look a little different because you're not going to have a child, but you're going to do X, Y, or Z now. And all of that is like a huge grieving process. And you have tools for all those sisters, right?
Absolutely.
Which is the big one I keep forgetting at the top of my head.
It's all big, hon. It all is big. Like the fact that, you know, we're putting hormones in our body to create a different environment for potentially having a baby. That is a challenge and switches things up for us. So it's really about the losses that we're going through and honoring them. So even like the loss of control, the loss of trust in our own body to do what biologically it's supposed to do. It's the loss of, you know, sometimes it's these intangible losses that feeling safe and secure, you know, support, the loss of support from other people who are just getting tired as you're going through this journey and maybe aren't there for you the way that you need them to be. So it's all these things, which is why I love the grief recovery method, because it doesn't matter what loss you're experiencing, that if you're open and willing to do the work, this program is a beautiful way of helping people move through the inevitable losses that we're all going to have in life. It's just, we've never been taught the tools. And so it really is being able to give people more tools to cope and have more resiliency going through these times of upheaval. Yeah,
it's amazing. It's really amazing. So,
and I would like to say, Crystal, for all your ladies, like anybody, if anybody's interested, I always do a discovery call, which is like, there's no impact for that whatsoever. It's free, and we'll spend as much time talking as you need to. But if anybody ends up deciding that's come through your referral for grief recovery, I'm happy to honor like a 50% discount from the one-on-one coaching piece.
Ooh.
So, but that would be and that would have to specifically come from this talk that you and I are doing. And, and I will keep that. When will you be posting this?
I'm not sure, but I am going to check with my guy. So probably in a few weeks, he'll put it up on live. So,
okay. So I won't put an end date on it. It's just, if they come from you, then they will be, I'll honor that for them.
Thank you so much. Cause I was going to say, we're going to have your link, and they can, with the link, can they book the call right there, or is it going to be your email? What do you prefer?
It'll be my email. So they'll just contact me through email, and I'll set that up.
Ladies, that's an amazing offer. That is really amazing. Thank you so much. I love that.
Pleasure.
I love it. And I'm going to ask you one last question. Is what's your best piece of advice for somebody going through infertility, and especially because you went through a couple miscarriages? Maybe your advice around that, or anything. What's your best?
So I always tell people, thank you for letting me say this last piece. So I always offer 4 things that as you're going through your thing. So number 1 is you're not alone.
Right.
Number 2 is that really honor your grief, like honor your emotions, whatever they are that are coming up for you. Number 3, action is the key to your recovery, not time. So when people say to you, like, time heals all wounds, that is another piece of misinformation that we've grown up with. So the action is the key to your recovery. And then it's never too soon or too late to heal your heart.
Wait, can we go back a little bit? What do you mean by action and not? Because I say this to people, I'm sorry, but I say, time heals all wounds. So action. And I am a big act. I always say your thoughts and your actions lead to results.
So time was going to pass regardless, right? Like time marches on for all of us regardless. But it's what you do within that time, that those actions or those steps that you take within that time that will help you to your healing. So the analogy that we use in grief recovery is, say you have your car and you've got a flat tire by the side of the road. So, you know, we sit and we look at the tire and like, we have all the emotions around the tire, like anger about like, now I have a flat tire, I'm going to be late, and all the things like I'm sad that I don't know, I can't change this, and all of the things, I'm going to be late, all of it. And we can sit there and feel the feelings that we have about this flat tire, and time's going to pass and nothing's going to change. Or we can pull out our cell phone, call CAA, or we can get the jack out and change the tire ourselves, and we'll get in the car and we'll be on our way. So it's not waiting for time to just magically have something happen. It is, time's going to pass anyway. It's what are the steps that are we taking within that time to help us towards our healing?
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay. Actions. And I always say your thoughts become your action. Like if you don't do that, I love it. I love it. So they can get this book from you because we're going to send them to you, and they can do a free discovery call.
Yep.
To chat and figure out if you guys are a good fit together, because not everybody gels with everybody. And I always say that's the best way to get to know somebody. That's why I
couldn't agree more.
Calls. Yeah. Yeah. Because you know what? Maybe Kirsten doesn't want to work with you. Maybe. I know they'll love you, but you never know. No. But you know, people have to have an open mind to this also. Right?
And you have to be in a space that you're ready to do the work, and not everybody's at that space. And sometimes it's just a timing issue, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
And one last question. I think I've said that 3 times now. Do you help couples? Like, do you ever do a couple together?
Not usually. I would work with people separately, because again, often when we work with family or couples, because we're careful about not wanting to hurt the other person, not saying anything that might be taken like out of context or anything else like that. So you can't really allow yourself to be actually open and honest. And one of the commitments that I have my clients make is that there's total honesty in this program.
Yeah. Good. Okay. I was just wondering, because I know I have a couple girls that the husbands jump on some of the calls, and then I have other girls in the program that they just do it solo, but I know I give their husbands the marching orders.
That's awesome.
So I was just wondering, because I know I'm going to get that question. So at least we have that one covered. Yeah. So I'm going to put your website, your social media, all that. All the details will be below. And thank you so much again.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
So much from our pre-call, which maybe we'll like, I'll give a little glimpse about that later. But yeah, we'll probably have to have you on again and talk more about actions we can take, because I like that. Yeah. I'm all about action. Like that's like always my magic word when they say choose a word for the year: action. And so thank you so much. We'll sign off now. Thank you, Kirsten.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you guys loved the interview with Kirsten Frey. She is unbelievable. I love all her knowledge. It really makes you understand what grief is. As she mentioned in the interview, she is giving anybody that contacts her or through me 50% off her services. So it's great for anything, whether you're going through fertility, if you suffer a miscarriage, if you're just like struggling to get over everything you've been through on your journey. Give her a call, mention Fertility Blooms, and she'll give you 50% off. And I'm just going to hold up her book really quickly, Grief Recovery Handbook. So if you want to get the book, get in touch with her too. She's a wealth of knowledge, and she will make you feel better. Honestly, she will make you feel better. Bye, everybody. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. I always forget to mention that, but make sure you do that. Bye.